Iron Man, Emperor of the World, played by the highly requested Tony Stark, Tom Cruise. This is brought to you by MTP FanFics, the second fanfic movie tie-in for the highly anticipated Avengers 2000 sequel. I would highly suggest you to wear headphones as you will have a better experience, and due to copyright, I will be using clips and comics from the original comic books and the MCU to give you a better experience. Without wasting any more time, let's enjoy the fanfic movie.
Tony Stark sat across his throne, thinking about how he has become Emperor Stark and the ruler of the world. He thought that his goal of becoming the ruler of everyone on his Earth has finally came true. Tony then thought of how events unfold all these years leading up to his declaration as Emperor of the world. In this universe, Tony was raised primarily by Obadiah Stane. His father, Howard Stark, was an alcoholic and had a violent temper. He often neglected Tony when he was younger and barely cared for him. Howard had Tony because of a one-night stand with a waitress at a bar. Howard fell in love with the woman, but she was killed in an accident the night after she gave birth to Tony. Howard was in despair and felt that now he had to bear the responsibility of raising Tony even though his mother was dead. Howard felt that Tony was a burden to him and rarely cared about him. This caused Tony to have a more dark and cruel nature as he grew up. Obadiah had an ulterior motive of taking care of Tony. He wanted to acquire Stark Enterprises, which was owned by Howard himself. Obadiah took care of Tony in hopes of manipulating him to hand over his father's company when the time came. However, Tony himself was a genius. He knew that Obadiah had an exterior motive, but decided to just play along with him. Tony despised his dad and did not want any connections with him at all. He wanted to prove that he could set up his own company without his dad's assistance. Over the years, Obadiah would lend a helping hand for Tony, and as Tony grew older, he started having strange visions. Tony keeps having visions of him being the conqueror of the world, with most of the world in a desolate state. His dreams had him ruling the world with an iron fist. As much as he had a dark nature, he felt that such ambitions are too much for him. He felt that it was something trivial and those nightmares are just messing with his head. Eventually, Tony developed his own Iron Man suit with Obadiah's assistance. His father was still the CEO of Stark Enterprises, and despite Tony being Iron Man, Howard refused to acknowledge his achievements. Tony helped countries who were in war with his Iron Man suit and even created an Iron Legion for them. Soon, Tony started having those strange dreams that seemed more like visions of the future. Tony saw himself with a cloak and ruling over the world which was desolate. Everyone else serving under him feared him of his tyranny, but the rest of the world were stricken with a disease. Tony started seeing these visions more frequent, and a voice spoke to him telling him that everyone else deserves to suffer, especially his father. Growing mad from those visions, he started developing a secret virus strain that would wipe out most of the food sources across the world. The virus strain was a mutated strain of the mad cow disease, and Tony planned to release this virus to the world. When the world is suffering from famine and in dire need of food source, Tony would present the cure to the virus in return for their loyalty to him. Tony developed a virus strain and a cure for the virus. He also created several devices that allow him to create man-made disasters, such as fake earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, destroying certain parts of the world. When the world suffered from these disasters created by him, Tony would don his Iron Man suit and provide aid to them. In the eyes of the refugees, Iron Man was their savior. Iron Man carried out his master plan with the man-made disasters for years. After several years of completing the virus strain, Tony used his Iron Legion across the world to spread the strain. The people were unaware of it, and soon enough the crops died, and the food source was polluted. However, there was a malfunction in the virus strain developed by Tony. At first, the virus seemed to just destroy the plants and animals. but people who consumed it started to show signs of the virus, with the most common sign being bloodthirsty. Soon, they started killing others who were not infected with the strain. Tony saw what happened with the world and was horrified. He merely wanted to create a world where they would surrender to him, their loyalty in exchange for food supply. He had not envisioned a world of vampires. However, the voice in his head started speaking again. It told him that this was a golden opportunity for him. He could use this chance to provide a sanctuary to the other survivors who wanted protection from the vampires. Tony smirked, and he immobilized his Iron Legion across the world. He collected several living vampires and used them as test experiments to create a cure in the form of nanites. By spreading the nanites in a vast area, the vampires turned back into normal people. He proclaimed to the world that he had a cure for the refugees who did not want to turn to vampires. In return, they would pledge their loyalty to him. His father and Obadiah were one of the victims of the vampire outbreak. Howard came to Tony when he found out that Tony had the cure and begged for it. Tony refused to entertain him and let him be killed. As Tony knew that Obadiah was using him from the start, Tony injected him with the virus strain, turning him into a vampire before blasting his head off with his repulsor. Soon enough, after millions have died being killed by the vampires or turned, Tony released an airborne cure after the entire world and all countries agreed to elect him as the president of the world. Years have passed since, and now Tony has elevated his position to emperor of the world. He still felt that something was amiss, even though now he ruled over the world. Most of the vampires have reverted back to their human form and be cured. The food supply has been restored, and Tony was awarded the Nobel Prize Award for his achievements of finding the cure for the virus strain. However, there were still reports of vampires who have mutated from the virus strain and went into hiding. Tony dismissed them as mere rebels who will perish in a matter of time. He soon discovered that there was a world somewhere, known as Atilian, where a group of superior race reside. They were off the radar, and Tony was unable to detect them despite using all his technology. During his rise to power, all of the Earth's scientists and most brilliant minds were recruited under Tony under disguise to develop a cure for the virus strain. Of course, during this time, Tony has already developed a cure, but he pretended to recruit them under his empire. One of the scientists was Reed Richards. In this mainstream universe, Reed was known as Mr. Fantastic, the leader of the Fantastic Four. But in this universe, he was merely a brilliant scientist. Being one of the major leaders of the project for the virus strain, he approached Tony to inform him of their progress. However, he stumbled across the cure that was already developed by Tony. Reed then accessed Tony's journal, which was Jarvis, and found out Tony's entire logs from the time he created the virus and the man-made disaster devices. Reed was shocked and informed his wife, Sue Storm, about this. He also learned of Tony's plans to experiment on the Inhumans' genetic potential to further enhance himself. Stark wanted to create a new race with the Inhumans' genetic to help him conquer the galaxy. Tony's drone spotted Reed spying on his information, and he eventually killed Richard. Sue knew of this information and hid with the Inhumans, taking her husband's final invention, an invisibility cloak, that allow her to be totally off the radar even under Tony's tech. Elsewhere in England, the leader of the remaining vampire pact, Morbius the Living Vampire, was discussing with the several remaining vampire armies general. Morbius, who was a vampire from the start before the strain, told them that they needed to resurrect his older brother, Dracula, who was long asleep. Morbius had an army known as the Living Vampires, which were infected by himself. As a result, Tony's cure was unable to revert them back. Morbius said that by having Dracula back with them, they could control the world with the vampires. The plan to have a full-scale vampire invasion was in progress at first, but Tony decided to release the cure, which caused a huge setback. They needed to find the resurrection elixir, which could grant its user immortality and resurrection from the dead. It was apparently created from the bones of an ancient godly race that existed on Earth before time and was handed down to a secret clan. However, the resurrection elixir was last known in Malibu, where Emperor Stark resides. Morbius immobilized his living vampire armies to track down the resurrection elixir in Malibu. Meanwhile, Sue Storm, who is now residing with the Inhumans, is now married with the king of the Inhumans, Black Bolt. Black Bolt lost his wife, Medusa, who was turned into a vampire, and he was forced to blow her head off with his scream. Using the Inhumans' technology, Sue managed to track down Tony's exact location. She told Black Bolt that the world needed to see the crimes of Stark, as he is not a savior, but a tyrant. Emperor Stark does not deserve to live anymore. She told Black Bolt that she herself would go and assassinate Tony herself. Black Bolt was hesitant as he has lost Medusa earlier and does not want to lose Sue again. She assured him that she would return safely. At Emperor Stark's residence in Malibu, he was plotting for a full-scale invasion on Attilan. However, with his tech unable to trace them, he was frustrated. Just then, the alarms in his residence were triggered. He received warnings that there was a breach in his front gates. Tony was shocked to see several vampires breaching his defenses and demobilizing his drones. He also noticed that the vampires were equipped with some high-tech armor that enabled them to defend against his drones. He wondered why the vampires were still existent even though 5 years have passed since the last virus strain occurred. The vampire assassins eventually made their way into Stark's residence, but were easily obliterated by Emperor Stark himself. Stark spared one vampire and demanded for answers. At first, the vampire was hesitant, but after Stark blew off his limbs, the vampire finally agreed to talk. The vampire told Stark that he is part of a vampire clan called the Living Vampire, led by Morbius, and they were seeking the resurrection elixir to resurrect Morbius' long-lost elder brother, Dracula, himself. Dracula would be able to command the vampires to victory. Stark was puzzled as he wasn't aware of such a thing called the resurrection elixir. He only had an arc reactor powering his chest, which was on him since he was a kid. Apparently, according to his father, Tony was a weak kid and consistently needed to depend on external power supply. Tony was in an accident that caused his chest to be impaled, causing him to be on the brink of death. His father then equipped his chest with the arc reactor to make him survive. It was also after that Howard started distancing himself from Tony, and Obadiah became his father figure instead. Stark figured that if he was able to acquire this resurrection elixir, he would not have to be dependent on the arc reactor in his chest. After killing the vampire, he started making the search for the resurrection elixir his priority. Morbius received news that his entire elite assassins were easily wiped out by Iron Man. Furious, Morbius said that he himself will undertake the task to retrieve the resurrection elixir as time was running out. Several weeks later, Iron Man made a public declaration to hunt down the remaining Inhumans. There was a huge radar that released a large output scale on his map. He figured that it would be the Inhumans' base. Iron Man said that the Inhumans are heretics and needed to be wiped out from the Earth. They possess traits that aren't human-like and would be a danger to humankind. The world agreed and started to launch a manhunt on the coordinates of the possible location of the Inhumans. Tony wanted to kidnap some Inhumans to acquire their genes and empower his armies. Eventually, Tony's Iron Legions tracked down and was surrounding Attilan. They found Attilan at the North Indian Ocean. Iron Man decided to wait till night before launching a full-scale attack. At the same time, Morbius and several other vampires managed to bypass and destroy Tony's drones and iron guards. As Tony was alone in his room, wondering whether this was a right choice after all, the voice that spoke to him countless times during his life was heard again. The voice told him that by getting the Inhumans, he would be able to conquer the entire universe, and the prophecies of him being the ruler of the universe will come true. Tony was then caught off guard by Morbius and his living vampires, who then ambushed him. A full battle ensued between the vampires and Iron Man. Iron Man easily defeated the other vampires, but had trouble fighting Morbius. Tony said that he doesn't understand the purpose of the vampires pursuing him. Morbius replied that Tony possesses the resurrection elixir. Tony disagreed, and that if he really did possess the elixir, he would not need to go the hassle to seek the Inhumans. Morbius took out an ancient relic that resembled a tablet. He showed the tablet to Tony, and the tablet started shining brightly. According to Morbius, the tablet reacts to the elixir, and the brighter it shines, meaning that the elixir source is near. Tony was puzzled, and as he was about to engage with Morbius, he felt something was creeping up near him. He activated his heat vision, but there was no response. He then felt a sharp knife piercing his heart. Tony screamed in pain and collapsed. He looked up and saw Sue Storm staring down at him. Sue said that this was revenge for the death of her husband, Richard, and for Tony's malicious plans from the start. Stark groaned in pain, and Morbius was shocked too. Sue said that she stabbed Tony with a special Atelian blade that was infused with poison, which could guarantee paralysis for life and death to anyone who is stabbed with it. Tony removed himself from the armor and lied down. He stared down at his arc reactor, which he noticed something weird was happening. The arc reactor had some blue fluid flowing out. Sue was shocked that Tony was still not dead, even after being pierced with the blade. Tony removed the blade from his chest and tossed it away. He felt the blue fluid in his hands. He couldn't feel his legs, but he was not dead either. Sue thought that the blade should have killed Tony by then. Morbius saw the tablet shining even brighter with the blue fluid on the ground. He realized that the blue fluid was indeed the resurrection elixir after all. That explained why Tony was still alive even after being pierced with the Atelian blade. Morbius wanted to grab what was left of the blue fluid, but Iron Man's defenses activated and they shot at him. Morbius realized that the resurrection elixir has flown into Iron Man and Dracula is unable to be resurrected anytime soon. He fled, leaving Iron Man and Sue behind. Sue used the invisibility cloak and told Tony that his crimes will be revealed to the public. Even if he cannot be killed now due to having immortality from the fluid, Stark is unable to move and is suffering from paralysis for life due to the damage from the Atelian blade. Sue then accessed the logs of Tony's doings from the time he created the virus strain until the time he wanted to slaughter the Inhumans for his own personal usage. The world soon knew of his crimes, and all the major governments launched a full assault on Tony's residence in Malibu. His Iron Legions, who were still stationed at Atelian, were all destroyed by Black Bolt's scream. Black Bolt has evacuated the Inhumans to all parts of the world when they knew of Iron Man's plans to capture them. Sue returned to Black Bolt and justice was served. Iron Man was captured by the World Police and his Iron Legion was deactivated. Before Tony was captured, he saw a log in his system that was meant to him when things go terribly awry for him. He played the log, and it was his father, Howard, in there. Howard said that while on an expedition in Tibet, he came across the resurrection elixir that was given to him by the monks of the temple. The monks presented him with the elixir as Howard has helped to save them from a terrorist attack. When Tony was involved in the accident and almost cost him his life, Howard decided to place the resurrection elixir in his arc reactor to power him forever. The cost of doing so is that Tony would have to live with the price of immortality and his loved ones would leave him earlier than him. Howard was ashamed of himself and decided to be hostile to his son. He wished that Tony would be able to use his powers and intelligence for good. After seeing the video message ending, Tony cried as his father had cared for him and didn't simply abandon him for no cause. However, things were already too late by then. Tony surrendered his fate to the World Police, and since he cannot be sentenced to death, he was trapped in an underground top-secret prison with all his tech and gadgets stripped and destroyed. After some time had passed, Tony started hearing voices again in his head, asking if he was satisfied with the outcome of everything that happened. He said that he was sad, and even as Emperor Stark, he felt something was amiss. Nothing can be done. The voice said that Tony gets a second chance to use his intelligence to conquer the universe, but this time alongside him. Why be just the ruler of the world when they can control the entire universe across time? Tony figured that since his life was a mess and now with immortality in him, why not? But he said that he was paralyzed and has no use. The man then injected Tony with a medicine and Tony could feel his legs again. The paralysis was gone. Tony then agreed to help the man and a portal opened in front of him. A man appeared from the portal and said to him that all these years he has been the voice in his head. He wanted to acquire the resurrection elixir, but since it is now in Tony, he has no choice but to accept it. He said that having an assistant or someone who has world domination in their mind are fitted to be rulers. He removed the shackles from Iron Man and brought Iron Man to the other portal where it was a giant spaceship. The man said that their plans are just beginning and someone else has failed the task previously. With Tony's immortality and intelligence, they can be the strongest villains of all time. Tony then asked what his name was, and the man merely replied, "Kang. I am Kang the Conqueror."